All right, let's start. Thank you so much for participating in this session on digital technology and how we can use digital technology for climate in agriculture. We have a really great panel today. We have Joe Puri, who's Associate Vice President of Strategy and Knowledge from IFAD. So welcome, Joe. We have Virginia. And Virginia is Deputy Director of Private Partnerships at the World Food Program. And we have Ali, who is Ali Abu Sawak, who is Regional Director, Central and West Asia, North Africa for CGIAR. So welcome, Ali. Welcome, everyone. My name is Yuri Suarez. I'm Chief Impact Officer at IDB Lab. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about a few of the joint initiatives that we have together, okay? So I'll ask the tech team to please put the presentation. It's gonna be a very short presentation. And we're just gonna go through 2 or 3 slides of them, and then we'll start with the questions. Doesn't seem to be working. So I'll ask you to flip the slides for me if you can, okay? So go to slide number 5, please. And one more. One more. One more, and they're there. Okay, here we go. Okay, so we have a couple of initiatives that we've been doing together with a group which is called Moonshots for Development. The Moonshots for Development group is an association of the innovation functions of different parts of multilateral and some bilateral organizations. And this is the first example of an artificial intelligence collaboration that the group has done, right? So what is it? It's a challenge, it's a global challenge where we're trying to look for startups and solutions that are addressing some of their most pressing needs in agriculture using artificial intelligence. So I had 3 areas what we're looking for. One of them are innovations in sustainable agriculture. The second one are innovations in natural resource management. And the third are innovations in essentially disaster risk identification, management, and also measurement, a very big function of disaster risk management. So if we can have the next slide, please. So we finished this first stage, and we found this tremendous group of companies in different countries, right? So these are the 10 finalists, and I put the three little icons to identify what they are. Most of them are on ag solutions, okay? Most of them are using artificial intelligence, layering satellite, layering ground measurement, soil measurement, layering drone technology to be able to address some of the issues on productivity in the ag sphere. Several of them are also on natural resources, how to manage water better, one of them, and the other one, how to reduce the use of fertilizers using AI technologies for optimization of fertilizer on the farm level. And then we also have one that's on disaster risk, and that's adatos.ai from Singapore. So the wonderful thing about this collaboration is that it allows us to reach different companies and different startups from different parts of the world. And for us, that's a huge advantage because, of course, we only work with Latin America. So it's great to have this variety of startups. Now, I'm just going to talk a little bit about a second collaboration that we're also doing, and this one is with IFAD, with Joe and her team. And so if we can go to the next slide. And this is called AgroWeb 3. So AgroWeb 3 is essentially an initiative for digital wallets. That's what it is, right? So it's an initiative that leverages IFAD's ability and capillarity to address issues in the agriculture sphere all over the planet, okay? With our development and capabilities of deploying Web3 based on our LangChain architecture. So these two things put together, we're collaborating to be able to address a number of different issues in agriculture with Web3. Now, these include the objective of kind of democratizing or making sure that carbon certificates and biodiversity certificates are able to reach smallholders, which essentially they're priced out of that market right now. It also includes extending commercial benefits of Web3 and integration of value chains to smallholders, and also providing them for a platform of better integration of payments, traceability, et cetera. So we're just starting it. We'll see what we can do together. But these are just a couple of the examples of how early stage innovation can be used in agriculture and the benefits it can have for climate and nature. So after this introduction, and the IT team, you can take down the slides now. Thank you so much for your help. What I'm going to ask you to do is each of our panelists here to introduce themselves and also maybe perhaps talk about what their institutions are doing or how they're using digital technologies today, right, to address some of these issues that we just talked about. So if I start with Joe, Joe, please take the floor and tell us about what IFAD is doing.
Thank you. Hello, hello. Hello. Yeah, they don't teach you this when you do your PhD, you know. Thank you so much. So I'm Joe. I'm the Associate Vice President in Strategy and Knowledge at the International Fund for Agricultural Development, and really privileged to be here. Thank you so much, Yuri. And the reason that I'm talking about innovations really that IFAD is doing, and we think about innovations in different ways. We think about methodological innovations, process innovations, product innovations, digital innovations, financial innovations, is because my department essentially leads on designing and supervising the overall investments that we do, right? So I'm going to try and address Yuri's question very quickly, just as hopefully as an appetite, as a whetting the appetite starter, and then I'm hoping that we can make it more interactive. One of the key things that we do is we support innovation challenges. And so within our investments, what we do is we support small teams that are also speaking to countries to understand what the demand is in countries, to then think about innovations that are solution-oriented in the context of rural development. This is why AgWeb 3 is really important and interesting for us. So the LangChain methodology and the technology that has been developed by the IDB Invest has been really important in understanding as to how we can have an interoperable system that takes technology to the smallholder farmer. One of the key things that has been missing in the overall discussion on climate and within that mitigation and adaptation has been how do we make sure that there is benefit sharing with smallholder farmers. And so while you can verify, you can certify carbon credits, and now we are thinking about resilience credits, we can think about resilience credits and carbon credits. It's really important to understand that this is that not just the verification is in the hands of smallholder farmers, but that it's easy, because that's the first rule for any innovation. But second, that it is transparent and that the data is owned by the people who generate it. And so what AgWeb 3 does is ensures that we are taking financing and finance access to the smallholder farmers, but the data that they provide is then within their control. So you can use then, say, blockchain methodology to essentially conduct financial transactions, but still withdraw from it and say the data that the smallholder farmer has belongs to him or to her. And that's why the element of privacy, the element of confidentiality, and yet traceability and transparency becomes really important. And that's why Ag Web 3 becomes really interesting and important for us. The second thing that we're doing within the overall digital space is also using AI and using AI in different ways. So in our loans and in our investments, we are using AI to understand as to where there is climate risk and how we can ensure that there are triggers in our investments and in our loans that then let us know as to when we've exceeded thresholds in terms of formulating our investments. And the risk mapping is there, but it needs to be really leveraged through technology so that we can use it in our investment decisions. We're also using that to understand as to how we are informing and supporting all of the SDGs. So for example, we're using Omnidata, which is in a Microsoft application, to understand all of our investments that we've done till now, and mapping them to SDGs to understand as to where our investments and our financing lies in terms of supporting the SDGs. Happy to talk about it as we go along. Thanks, Yuri.
Thank you so much, Joe. And now we'll go over to Virginia. Every time I talk about the World Food Program, I have to say it. None of us here has a Peace Nobel Prize, right? You guys do. That kind of separates a little bit the discussion, right? So I'm always envious of that. Congratulations for your prize a few years ago. But now, how can you introduce yourself, and also how is the World Food Program, and particularly the Accelerator, which is this really great thing that you guys have going on in Munich there, how are you using digital technology for agriculture?
Thank you, Yuri. You can hear it's a bit of a fight who is louder. Well, first of all, thank you so much. Today is also Peace Day in COP, and we are launching. We are extremely happy that with UAE and with many other partners that the declaration on climate relief and recovery is being launched. And I think this is a fantastic day to accept that food is important. That people are suffering already today, and while mitigation actions take an effect, we have to support those that are already suffering from the impacts of climate disasters. And then a second, I wanted to say that I'm very, very pleased and very honored to be here with you, partners, with IDB, with IFAD, with CGIAR, because of what we're doing, but also particularly because of what we are planning to do together. And I think this is precisely the essence of why you have put us here together. In the World Food Program, we are very conscious of the use of data, and as Joe said, about how can we use data to influence our decisions, but also the decisions of those that need to be empowered to be climate actors. We are at the front lines of war, but we are also at the front lines of climate disasters, and it's very, very important that we empower every day and as much as possible those that have to deal with those disasters. And so one of the main key elements is data. We have access, we have 160 million direct beneficiaries, but also we work with hundreds of millions of people that pass us data every day. And this is data about food availability, affordability, but also about conflict, about climate. We have these collaborations with all the governments and also the World Meteorological Organization, cooperation with Google, with other institutions that provide us a lot of data. And we put that data in a place called Hunger Map Live. That's an open source. It's something that everyone can use, and that we want to have accessible and for everyone, but that everyone could take advantage of this data. And in that Hunger Map Live, what you can find is those trends in terms of food availability, in terms of food consumption, but also climate trends, water trends, and also social potential strengths. And unfortunately, as you can say, this is one of the worst periods that the world has ever experienced. We have the highest world prices that we have ever registered in history, and it's even more important to act upon that. But so we have all those data, and we started putting that together. I think it was in 2019. This has moved forward, and now we are cooperating with the private sector. That's why I'm here, and I didn't introduce myself, by the way. I will do it afterwards. I work with the private sector, and we try to work more and more with the private sector, also to enhance those innovations, and also to be the best of the best on what we do, by also partnering with the best, including these organizations, because we have that responsibility. So the hunger map allows us to use data in three areas. One is to do anticipatory action because we work with the governments in order to understand what is going to happen, whether there are droughts or floods or whatever, and support the population. We can discuss examples if you want afterwards, but also immediately when a disaster strikes, understanding where people are, what is the damage to people, to crops, and immediately with less and less time, thanks to data and to digital technology, be there as soon as possible and support as soon as possible together with the other organizations. And then afterwards, also in the third area on resilience, whenever we have more data and we can understand better what is going to happen, do that planning and work with that planning also with farmers that can have access to those decisions. And then just on the accelerator, additionally, in order to ensure that we keep updated and we keep on top of what we can do on innovation, but also with digital technology. We have the accelerator, the World Food Programme Accelerator based in Munich. That has become, I understand, also the most, the biggest social impact accelerator in the areas of hunger, also climate, water, actually also on health. And through this accelerator, we are supporting those ideas, startups, youth, and companies, and people that have these initiatives, understanding whether they are feasible, cost efficient, and then gathering those that can support them, and then supporting those initiatives in order for them to become viable or to become scalable. And thanks to that, since their creation, we have supported 37 million people have benefited from these, and about 200 companies. But I stop here and I'll introduce myself. My name is Virginia Villar. I work in the World Food Programme as Deputy Director at the global level for private sector partnerships. So understanding what can we do with the private sector, with foundations, and also with the individuals. And my background is more in the field. I've been 21 years in the field in all the different crises and continents that you can imagine. I'm very much operational background.
Thank you so much, Virginia, and congratulations for everything that you've been doing. It's just tremendous work of the World Food Programme, and it is Peace Day, so we have a huge intersection between climate, nutrition, and food and peace. So this is something that is critical for all of us here. So I guess it's a great moment for us to be talking and having this panel today. So Ali, go anywhere on the planet, and CGIAR is the reference, is the jewel, the crown jewel in terms of research, in terms of innovation in the ag sector. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you guys are doing on digital front.
Okay, well, thank you so much for the opportunity to share a little bit more about this. My name is Ali Abu Saba. I'm the Director General of the International Center for Agricultural Research in Dry Areas, known as ICARDA, and I'm also the Regional Director for the CGIAR in Siwana. So innovation is really at the center of the work that the CGIAR does, whether it's in the area of water, crops, livestock, the whole range of the food chain and agriculture sectors. So maybe the best way is to share some examples rather than explain what we do. but also put that within the context of our conversation on that and evolution of the web and artificial intelligence. The CGIAR develops innovations, especially to help farmers to deal with the impact of climate change, more nutritious and also less resource demanding. So doing more with less. And then the idea here is that in the past, we were limited by the capacity of the extension services across the world to take these innovations into farmers. With the evolution in remote sensing, mobile technology, the entire space of agriculture extension, sharing of innovation has expanded enormously. And now, if you are a farmer, no matter where in the planet you live, you still have access to the latest innovations that the CGIAR provides. If I take the example of the work we do in India, we're using remote sensing to look at farmer fields and how the different yield across different locations are, and being able to develop models to see whether this is related to over-irrigation, under-irrigation, or pest or disease. And through a very simple interface on mobile technology, you're able to help inform the decision makers, the extension workers, the farmers on what is the problem and what is the solution. In this part of the world, GCC in UAE, we have developed models using remote sensing to help monitor the movement of the red palm weevil, which is a major threat to date palm industry. I call it industry because it's a major backbone in terms of how this part of the world contributes to the date palm industry. We're using remote sensing in Egypt to help look at the water use and using some of the land-based systems and looking at the evapotranspiration and be able to inform the distribution of water and even the cropping system across the country. If you go to Morocco, very similar applications are used to promote conservation agriculture. So in short, the evolution in technology, remote sensing, and data management has enabled us to expand exponentially our ability to reach farmers. If I zoom in a little bit further into artificial intelligence, we are now looking at ways to expand this capacity in a much bigger way, because we are now able to develop algorithms that will now help take pictures that farmers will take in any particular location and go, subjected to a much more complicated assessments to be able to advise on the best treatment for a particular infestation, on the need for a specific nutrients deficiency that the farmers will need to apply, or even help with the estimation of potential crop yields and link this to the best market information so the farmers will get the best out of it. So these are just a few examples of how we do it. And of course, you mentioned the gene banks. This is really the backbone of how we develop all of these innovations. And we're also able to use the experiments across the world to analyze the information and come up with the best guidance to our national research partners with regards to the development of future crops that they need to have in place to help the farmers deal with the negative impact of climate change. Thank you.
That's really wonderful, and I think one of the things that even comparing a few years ago, one of the things that we have here is the capability of doing this layering of technologies and data layers, the dramatic improvement in Earth observation, right? That even a few years ago that we didn't have the resolution and the AI technology also to be able to understand what is it that you're observing. So I think this is really going at a super rapid pace. So let me go back to Joe and ask about one of the things that is super important for our region, and I think for all of us, which is how to even when we looked at the AI finalists, the majority of the innovation that we've seen in those 10, and also we just did a landscape study of all climate tech innovations in LAC. There's growing, but there's less innovation quantitatively in terms of solutions addressing adaptation. Okay. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't any, and it's improved a lot over the last few years. But can you talk a little bit about kind of digital technologies for adaptation, and particularly smallholders, which is, it's dear to our heart, dear to your heart too. What's most promising here? What do you see in your portfolio? What do you see in your work in IFIN?
Great question, Yuri. So actually, you sort of laid up some of the comments that I was going to provide in my next round. First, a very quick pitch, and I also want to introduce two of my colleagues who are in the audience. There's Jani and there's Kenji. And the reason that I'm pointing them out is yesterday, we announced the Arcafim investment that IFAD is doing, bringing together. So this is Africa Rural Climate Adaptation Financing Mechanism. And the reason that I wanted to talk about it is that it both represents a financing mechanism, but also represents the use of technology where we are working with Equity Bank on the ground. So it's a $200 million platform, but we hope to leverage it and essentially get approximately $700 million additionally. But the key thing is creating a taxonomy of what constitutes adaptation actions, because one part is catalyzing a completely new market, right? And this is in Kenya, Rwanda, Tanzania, and Uganda. So 4 countries, but we are going to do Arcafim phase 2 as well, inshallah. And the idea is we want to change the market so they are thinking far more. Definitely renewable energy is important. The quality of access to energy is important. But we also want to change the market so that we are thinking far more about early warning systems, differentiated crops, exploring new gene banks, changing, putting new crop varieties that are far more resilient. But for that, farmers also need to be incentivized. And so it combines some of the financial technology that we are using, where you have longer tenures, lower interest rates, but then ensuring that the on-lending that banks on the ground are doing is also in eligible categories. How do you track and trace that? And that's where it becomes really important that we use digital technology to understand as to what is the on-lending going forward for, because this has been one of the key challenges. So first is creating that taxonomy. But the second thing is also ensuring that this is transactionally not as burdensome for the intermediate banks or the regional banks that we are working with. And that then becomes possible because we are using digital technology to ensure, to verify, and to pass down a lot of the benefits of this to the smallholders on the ground, right? So that's one. The second is, there's a vision for adaptive crops and soil health. This is VAX. And again, I know that FAO is also at the forefront of this, but the US government is supporting IFAD now to try and see as to how we can bring in adaptive crops and ensure soil health at the same time. For ensuring soil health, you've got to look at not just what is happening on the surface with respect to soil, so above the ground, but also below the ground, to look at organic matter, to understand soil health, to understand how much is the organic matter both above and below. And then to also be looking at, what's happening basically in the atmosphere, right? And for this, we need technology, and we need technology to understand. And so GIS technology, extremely high resolution, but then the ability of GIS technology to also, with better interpretation, because now clearly it all depends on how we interpret maps to then show organic matter on the ground, becomes really key for us, right? So in VAX, to then understand as to how we are measuring soil health becomes key. And there we're collaborating also with the CG to then understand all of that. And then the third part is also lowering methane, one of the key things that we also want to see. And so that's on the mitigation side. And I know that your question is on adaptation, but just on lowering methane, because mitigation, especially for smallholder farmers and for rural people, has to come with the benefit of adaptation. Otherwise, smallholder farmers are not going to be able to adopt this. So just transitions is really the key sentiment that we have behind all of the work that we are doing on the ground. And there, so low methane livestock production mechanisms become very important. And there we are using digital technology to also ensure, for example, how pastoralists move. Rangeland management becomes a very key part and contribution from digital technology to try and see as to how we can lower the methane content and increase the quality of livestock that is managed on rangelands by pastoralists. Thanks.
Well, absolutely. We certainly need to talk about the taxonomy. I think that can be a public good for all of us. It's something we're struggling with for sure. And, you know, congratulations, Kenji. I think certainly IDB is very interested in seeing if we can adopt that taxonomy. It solves a lot of problems. So Virginia, let me flip the script a little bit and kind of throw a question into your core business, which is, if you're looking at the biggest challenges that the World Food Program has today, okay, in reaching who you need to reach quickly, addressing their needs, which sometimes are almost survival needs, right? In some cases, how do you see technology being an enabler for you to be able to break those or address those challenges? Or first of all, you can talk about what are the challenges, and then how do you see this being something helpful for the WFP?
Thank you. Well, the challenges are, today we have, as I said, the world food prices are as high as they have ever been registered. Then we have fuel prices that are increasing. Then we have lack of affordability and availability of fertilizers for many countries. In Africa, this is impacting them enormously. They used to produce 70% of what they consume. Now they are producing less and less because of that. At the same time, we have worldwide less offer in terms of food with the war in Ukraine. That is affecting much of the land, and then obviously, if you produce less, you need more. So the demand is increasing, the offer is decreasing, and then the transporting of food, the price is increasing because the fuel prices is increasing. So all a combination, and then of course to that we add conflict. Which is fueled by also food insecurity and climate disasters, and then climate disasters. So you have populations that are dealing with food, acute and progressively more acute food insecurity. We are dealing with climate disasters that are more and more common and more regular, come more regularly. You know, our executive director was saying, since I arrived, I have a crisis every week, if not 2 or 3. And it's true. We see the more regular crisis. So the challenges for more and more people, today we almost have 800 million people in acute food insecurity, and that amount of people is growing, and that's a challenge for all of us, right? And so what we can do, and we can do also supported by data and digital technology, is first of all, and in as much as possible, anticipate, support those communities, or lower that impact of the climatic disaster, but also the food insecurity. So on that, with all those data that I talked to you about, and trying to put even more, using even more that GIS accuracy, can be up to 20 centimeters. First of all, anticipate for floods, for instance. we have a couple of tools, but one of them we developed so perhaps for anticipation. PRISM is a tool that is basically a climatic risk disaster forecasting tool. With that, we put all those meteorological elements together, and we have that now focused mainly in Asia, but the export is planned for worldwide. And basically with that, we can anticipate a lot of the disasters, with soil moisture, with water, with rain trends, but also supporting the population understand when there is a risk. And so with that data, for instance, in Bangladesh, we identified that one of the rivers, Yamuna River, was going to flood. And we immediately injected cash, small amount of cash to 145,000 families that took their families, took their cattle, took everything they could, tried to protect their houses. They left. 4 days later, the flood happened, and then when we came back, the cost of the emergency was cut by half. We did the same thing in Nepal. The cost of the emergency was 1/3, and we spared any lives and livelihood. So this is a little bit on using that. It's called PRISM, is open source, is available to everyone, and the idea is we have that tool, we are sharing it with the government, and we are working with, obviously, directly with the government and with other organizations, other UN and international. And I think the task, and to join what Joe said, is to bring all those data to the people that are going to benefit from it. And that's where I think our collaboration to expand that. I think there is a lot of digital technology that actually has shown initiatives that are worthwhile in this term of agriculture. But the main challenge, and CGIAR and IFAD, are working even to have more and more, but the main thing is to scale up so that more and more people benefit from it. Perhaps if you allow me just a couple more examples in terms of also anticipating, we also have in terms of anticipate, let me also use this information can be used also for resilience. This is not only to anticipate a disaster, but with this information, we already know that in Ethiopia, there's going to be 1.5 degrees more all across the year in a few years. That means that coffee is going to be a problem in many parts of Ethiopia, and planning with the government and planning with the farmers to change and to adapt those crops to something that is much more heat resistant is something that we should be. So it's not only about preventing a disaster and responding to a disaster that I will mention now. It's also about planning for resilience, strategic and basic planning, with very simple data and very tools, digital tools that already exist, and information that we already know, to take that and bring it to at a scale for knowledge. If you allow me one more thing on responding to an emergency, because obviously the emergencies happen and sometimes happen and we cannot estimate it. Truth is, when 90% of the climatic disasters, we know they are going to happen. We just don't know the probability. So we are working now on more, that's one of the things that I'm directly involved in, working more with private sector, with the different providers, to ensure that we are much better at ensuring the probability. So if we know that there is going to be a drought with 60% probability or with 90% probability, it changes, in terms also of having partners that contribute to this. So this is about anticipating, but also some disasters happen and we need to respond immediately. And also, thanks to the accelerator, we also, and the collaboration with Google Research, we have this tool which is called Sky, which is about artificial intelligence and planet, and satellite imagery that supports us in understanding whenever there is an emergency, we can be 13 times quicker and 77 times cheaper than the normal needs assessments. So whenever there is a disaster, we at the moment can analyze the damage in several areas in 48 hours. It used to take, I deal with a lot of these needs assessment in my past, it used to take weeks for that. Now we can use that, and that's one of the tools that needs to be scaled up immediately, because we need to be identifying the needs as quickly as possible, so that all the agencies can act upon as quickly as possible.
Wow, 10x on the time and 100x almost on the cost. I mean, you can't get more disruptive than that. So that's pretty amazing.
And I have a couple more examples, but maybe afterwards on also innovations. I don't know, maybe on another question.
So Alia, one of the things that we found when we looked at a lot of these new companies in the ag sector is that they're increasingly integrating digital technologies with life sciences, biotech, and that kind of that intersection, probably an intersection of digital and everything, but that intersection of digital gene research. How do you see that playing out, or how do you see that becoming more established in the work that you do, and in the ability to get these solutions to smallholders?
Okay, I think this is a very critical question, because if you really want to go to scale, you need to see and find ways to work with the private sector. And most of the infrastructure that is currently available is owned by major tech companies, but also new players in that space. So we started with Google, for example, a few years ago, to try and test some weather forecasting models and comparing with some ground truthing, because without that ground truthing across different locations, it becomes very difficult to actually have any reliability on those types of forecasts. So, and of course, this is also an excellent opportunity, because in return, we're also able to use their platforms for other applications to have better access to farmers. More recently, as a couple of weeks ago, we started to have a conversation with one of the newcomers, Planet Satellites. They have about 500 small satellites, the size of a shoebox, going across the globe, and a kind of resolutions that we could not have dreamt of. So this is now allowing us to do things in a very different way. And of course, the beauty is that they have these arrangements for research for development organizations that are not for profit like ourselves, to be able to leverage and use technologies and be able at the end to have affordable solutions to farmers. So we're seeing a major evolution in that space that is allowing us increasingly to become more present at a farmer level. I just want to go very quickly back to a couple of examples, because we talked about adaptation, and I think it's important to recognize that water is really the most limiting factor when it comes to agriculture. So within the breeding programs, we're trying to look and think differently about how you address this challenge. So in India, they have about 5 million hectares of land that goes on rice after rice, with about 80 days or 75 days of fallow, nothing on the ground, but there is residual moisture. And in residual moisture. And in India, everybody eats lentil. It is a very strategic thing. Yeah? But lentil takes usually about 90 days to have a full crop. So through breeding programs, working with our national partners, we've been able to produce what we call super early lentil maturing varieties. So you're able to squeeze it in 60 days and introduce it in between 2 rice crops over 5 million hectares of land using residual moisture. So thinking that way, it's the most resource, efficient production system, and it's leveraging breeding in ways we have not done before. Because in the past, our breeders were focused on more yield, and that's it. Not so much on the resource use efficiency. So this just, one example. There are so many that I could cite, but I just want to explain that. One last very quick one on wheat. Wheat is known to be a cold environment, crop, and with a lot of improvements, some of the North African countries and others have been growing wheat. But through the improvement and breeding programs, we've been able to actually adapt wheat to the hot and drought-tolerant environments in Africa, And we've developed varieties that are now used in 12 African countries. And we've helped Ethiopia and Sudan to almost become self-sufficient on wheat production. And now they're moving into export. So I believe the evolution in science have not been sufficiently factored in when we look at doomsday scenario and talk about climate change and how bad it's going to be. I think there is a lot that science can offer, but you need to invest in science. You need to think differently, like the example I mentioned about lintel, not simply you do the usual science, but do it differently and thinking for ways you can really help farmers adapt to this and also exploit opportunities for improved nutrition. Thank you.
So I know Joe has a question, and the interesting thing is that the lentil example, when you multiply it by the number of hectares that you actually can get, the result is vast,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So this is almost instantaneous scaling if producers are able to adopt it.
Exactly, and it also improves the nutrition of the food because India, the population have been eating rice after rice, and then lentil has 36%
So much
plant
more
protein.
nutrition. Yeah, so much more. So we're running a little bit behind time. So I'm going to ask Joe, ask your question, and then we'll just a very lightning round of closings for the panel.
Yeah, Ali, great example. Can you tell me what adoption rates are like for the quick maturing lentil crop? Because I mean, and we should talk after this panel as well. But do you have a sense of what those adoption rates are?
Well, the plan is to roll it over 5 million hectares of land. So the number of smallholders, I don't have it off the top of my head, but they're in millions,
Okay.
given that they're largely smallholder farmers, and also spillover benefits to Bangladesh, Nepal, and the entire group of countries that are high consumers of lentil. And the idea by shortening is that you're able to also use a bit of the cool weather before you run into the heat, and then you are also able to have higher quality lentil, not just a lentil crop.
So let's stay with you. Closing up, summing up, what do you want the audience to take away from this panel? What is the most, for you, what's the most important thing to take away?
I want the audience to leave this session with a strong hope and belief that if we make the right choices, especially in investments in science and innovation, leveraging technology and the evolution that we are seeing, there can be significant hope that we don't necessarily need to see the doomsday that everybody is talking about. We just need to do what we have to do, and we need to help the policymakers, the environmentalists, the world leaders and governments to be able to have the right access to knowledge and information, science-based evidence for them to make the right choices. Thank you.
Wonderful. Virginia, what's the takeaway for you?
So I will build on the conclusions of Ali. I think I agree. That's one of the main steps, and I support that. And let's there not only invest in science, data and technology, but let's ensure that we have the investment also that is necessary and the drive to scale it up, to scale it so that it does reach the millions, the hundreds of millions of people that need the access to data, the access to technology, the use of that technology, and that we put it to use, to scaled use, so that we all benefit, and that we can only do if we join these forces, and also if we keep, as we say, accelerating this innovation, and then scaling it up.
Joe?
My takeaway is pessimism is for losers. And clearly what we need to think about is that there's this wonderful book that I read, I think 2 summers ago, which is The Wizard and the Saint. And it's essentially the genesis of the entire environmental movement, where, of course, the saint will tell you it's doomsday and we should all die today, and that's the only way to think about it. But the wizard is exactly what I think all of us are talking about, and hopefully the audience as well, which is that technology can really help us to be disruptive. And here we've got fantastic examples of where technology can be disruptive. I think for me, one other thing that I would like to talk about the next time you do this, Yuri, would be also, how can we get past the last mile? And which is why my question to Ali. A lot of new technology and lot of new behaviors requires that we also invest in the last mile. And that's where behavioral insights and behavioral science can play a very important role. Insurance, even now, insurance take up, even amongst smallholders, is approximately 18 to 20%. And we need to do something about it. So one of the methodologies that we've tried, and it's in 5 countries in the inclusive green financing programs that's supported by IFAD and the GCF in West Africa, is insurance where we pay the 100% of the premium the first year, 80% second, 50% third, and then it sort of declines, but it changes behavior of the farmer to then see how you can reduce basis risk and change their behavior so that by the 5th year, you've got 100% premium payment by the farmer, convinced that it works. So we've got to adopt methodologies such as those if we want to change behavior in the last mile. Thanks.
All right, wonderful. I take it as an invitation for us to do another panel. Wonderful panel, Joe Puri, Virginia Virarrebas, and Ali Abusaba. Wonderful panel. Congratulations.